David, thank you for sharing a topic that is very timely, a topic for you that is very personal. So let me ask you a question. For any of us who might be worshiping right now in person online, or they might be worshiping at a later time online, what's next? We just heard this powerful testimony. We've heard this powerful sermon. So what do we do if we're struggling with mental health right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is that if you are somebody who is struggling right now, or if you know someone personally who is struggling right now, there is help available. We do have this handout, this mental health resource handout that you received when you came in this morning, and I'm assuming it's available for folks who are joining online as well. There's the number of the suicide hotline that I called is on there, and there are some other resources available. So help is available. Please reach out. Please ask for help. I know Jennifer and Mac will be around after the service as well if you just need to talk to somebody. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is you all have already made a big step in broaching this subject, right? There's been a lot of silence around mental health and mental health challenges and mental health struggles. So just by opening up a conversation and talking about it, we've made a huge step here, right? So feel good about that, right? Right? Claim the victory. And then there's a lot of next steps that we can take as community. One that I'll lift up is mental health first aid training. Mac mentioned that that's something I've been certified in. That's a great resource for congregations to get folks who are trained, not just folks who are pastors and up here, but the folks who are standing back at the doors and answering phones and just running into people on the street who might be in crisis. Mental health first aid is a wonderful resource. And there's some resources as well on my website, which is on that handout as well. Lots of great next steps that we can take as communities.
Awesome. And that resource will be available for you as you head out today. And if you're online, go to our website. It is on our website. So, Dave, I got to be honest, in this year alone, we've had 27 school shootings. We've had 212 mass shootings. Movies don't depict mental illness in a good light. In fact, it's in almost every horror movie. There's a stigma around mental illness that is very scary and very traumatic for us, especially in light of what happened Tuesday and the death of so many children and adults. How do we wrestle with that as a community?
Yeah, thanks. This is a question that has a lot of complexity in it, and I'm just going to tell you, in one of my books, I spend a whole chapter talking about this topic, and it's still not enough. Right. So I just want to invite you to hold some complexity here as I try to give a pretty brief answer. And I just want to answer this by talking about how this goes for me when I hear news about a shooting like what happened this week or last week. Which is that, the first thing is I try to just shut up for a little bit. And I try to actually, get past the numbness and let myself feel the tragedy of this thing and the tragedy that we've come to be numb to it. And then I wait, and especially, I'm just going to say, if the person who was doing the shooting was a young man, if they look kind of like me, then it's not going to take very long before somebody says they were crazy. And here's what I want to tell you. Statistically in this country, it is more likely that people with mental illnesses are victims of violence rather than perpetrators. There's actually no statistically significant relationship between mental illness and acts of violence. So I want to invite you to hold some complexity in a couple of ways. One is that if we're going to have this conversation, we've got to be ready to have a hard, big, deep, wide, complex conversation about the kind of things that have to be true for these kind of things to be normal. And there's going to be a lot of tough things to talk about in that conversation. If we are talking about mental health and mental health resources all the time, if we are out there being fierce advocates for mental health, then maybe we can talk about that when there's an act of violence. But man, if you don't talk about it the rest of the time, I better not hear us talking about it suddenly when you need an easy scapegoat for why this happened in our communities. Because there are a lot of people who are suffering with mental health challenges. And we are not here to be scapegoats so that legislators and communities get to dodge hard conversations about why this kind of thing is happening. So there's a lot more that can be said there, but that's the meat of my reaction to it.
So one final question, which I think particularly pertains to the Christian faith and how Christians historically have approached mental illness, and particularly in light of how Hollywood portrays mental illness and demon possession. So since The Exorcist on, we kind of contribute, demonic possession is mental illness. So how do we wrestle with the difference between the mental illness and Satan?
Sure. Yeah. Another complex one. So all right, we'll hold this. Let me say two layers of things. One, this is what I'll say. In my experience in churches has been that stigma has created two types of Christian communities when it comes to conversations about mental health struggles. There's a type of Christian community that blames Satan or blames a lack of faith or blames sin whenever they see something that looks like a mental health challenge. It must be because this person hasn't prayed hard enough or is possessed by a demon. That is not the kind of community I grew up in. I grew up in the other kind of community that tends to be created by stigma, which is a community that just never talks about it at all. Right? It's just not a polite thing to bring up that so-and-so's son is in the hospital, so-and-so's dad has a mental health challenge, right? So that means that there are kind of two kinds of conversations we need to have about this, right? If you are somebody who has a mental health challenge and you have felt you have been stigmatized or you have been quite literally demonized, right? I want you to rebuke that in the name of Christ, okay? We're gonna get rid of that, and we're gonna move on, and we're not gonna talk much about demons. I did not grow up with that kind of stigma. And so actually for me, in the hospital, stories in the New Testament about demons and exorcisms and things like this, they were actually kind of helpful for me as images. This thing, it felt like I had this thing that wasn't me, but was kind of in me and kind of making me do things I didn't want to do, right? And so the fact that Jesus sees people as people and talks to people and offers healing to people was really important to me, right? So our scriptures can offer us these rich images for healing, but they are designed to be images of healing, not weapons to be used against people who are already suffering, right? And so I think that's kind of to me the key distinction to make. What are the stories that we need to tell and that I need to tell in my individual life? What are the stories I need to receive that are healing stories? And what are the stories that have maybe been used to harm me that I can say, look, that's not what Jesus would have ever wanted with this story. So if I need to maybe put that story aside for a little bit, there's a lot of Bible to study, right? I can bump that one to next year and get around to it again.
That's good.
Yeah.
If I give David a round of applause.